Today, Randy and his good friend Jason Miller sits down for a frank discussion about the state of affairs in the Bigfoot community. John Baranchok, a doctor of psychology, joins the discussion. Be warned, the gloves come off, so exit now if you are allergic to the truth. Because your feelings may be hurt. I guarantee it.
There you go.
Hey, hey.
Hey. All right. So I think you might have a good shot.
There he
Now,
is. This is Dr. John Baranchok. He is a clinical psychologist, and he is an author. He wrote a book called Psychological Horizons in Scientific Bigfoot Research.
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you, people, get on Amazon, buy the book, because, and I was telling Jason, because you need to have it sitting on a shelf behind you, or you need to have it on your coffee table so that when people come over, they will think that you're smart. And if and if you read the book, you can actually be smart. But until you read the book, people will just think you're smart.
Yeah. And Jason's got the newest edition of it, which is sitting behind him, which is called Grasping Sasquatch, Prepping for Scientific Fieldwork. The one you mentioned, I self-published, and then Doug Hychek picked up that book, and it's available under that title as well.
Okay. Well, also, if people want to peruse any of your interviews or your podcast or your YouTube things, you can go to the Untold Network, which is Doug Hijinks and
Yeah, the Untold.
and it's the Grasping Sasquatch under the umbrella of the Untold Network. So you. And I encourage you to go over there. I actually listened to a couple of podcasts, maybe even part of a third one last night, trying to prep for this conversation. I'm duly impressed. My daughter is a clinical therapist, and she almost continued to get. She's got her master's degree, and she almost went to get her doctorate and finish out with her PhD. So she already diagnoses me left and right every time something goes wrong. And if she would have went ahead and got her doctorate, she could just go ahead and get me on some medication.
She'd have to be a psychiatrist for that.
Okay.
I'll recommend some medication.
Recommend some medication.
Right. So tell me, John, I know the discussion where I want, from what I heard, what I listened to last night, it's hard for me to grasp that within this arena, you're going to get that many people that actually want to do it in a scientific way. Even getting someone to write down in a journal that I said, look, start putting things. To get people to do anything like that it's like pulling eye teeth. So how do you convince people to be more scientific in their thought processes?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. That's one of the reasons why my that's one of the reasons why my podcast ended at 36 episodes, which you can also see on YouTube, by the way, my podcast. You don't have to go. It's available on Untold Radio, but it's also available on YouTube. I don't know. I spent since I self-published the book, I spent the last, I guess it's going on 4 years now, trying to figure that out, how I get people interested in that. And that's not an answer I really have. We're using, right now, the model we're using is a naturalistic or observational model. John Muir, make drawings of the species that you're seeing or take photographs of the species that you're seeing, footprints, foot casts, pictures thereof. And and that's how most sciences begin, is with observation. But after observation, if you really want the science to become science, truly scientific, well, not truly, because observational science is a true science, but scientific in the sense that the scientific community would be open to our findings, you've got to begin to do experiments on what it is you're studying. You know, it would be akin to, I think it was Isaac Newton who discovered gravity when the apple fell off the tree onto his head, I guess is the story. And so that apple fell on our head about 40, I don't know exactly how many years it's been since the Patterson Gimlin film, 45, 46, 47 years. That apple fell on our head that many years ago. And what we've been doing ever since then is akin to Isaac Newton going around looking for apples to fall off trees, you know, looking for more examples of the observation of gravity, but not moving on with experimental designs to prove gravity. And ultimately, of course, that's what Isaac Newton did. He began to do a variety of experiments to prove that gravity exists. And I think, you know, that's the stage we should be in with our Sasquatch research. We've got mounds of observational research that point to all the different phenomena that Bigfoot produces, but we're kind of ending there. And psychologic science is uniquely positioned to move us forward because we have a proven track record of capturing those intangibles. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by intangibles, you can't directly measure an emotion. You can see the results, the behavioral results of an emotion. You can see when somebody has a tantrum, or how they bat their eyes at you when, you know, they're in love, or when they make their angry frown. Those are behavioral manifestations of emotions, but that's not the raw emotion itself. Same with intelligence. We can give somebody an IQ test, and we're testing the behavior of intelligence, but intelligence is still this intangible thing that we can't touch or feel. We can see the result of. And because Bigfoot, the creature or being, or whatever you want to call it, I want to be as inclusive as possible. But Bigfoot is kind of elusive and intangible, hard to touch, hard to see, hard to feel. And so what I'm proposing in my book is that we make that shift from just behavioral observations and start running experiments with these behavioral observations. So instead of just going out in the woods and doing a bunch of tree knocks and seeing if we get tree knocks back, let's use that as one part of an experiment, see how many times we get a tree knock back when we're around Bigfoots and how many times we don't. But then let's do that same thing when we're in an area where we know Bigfoot doesn't exist, but humans do. And let's do the same number of tree knocks that we did in the human area, where we're measuring human behavior, as we did the number of tree knocks deep in the woods when we were measuring Bigfoot behavior. And so in doing so, we're capturing the essence of Bigfoot behavior when it comes to tree knocks, and we're capturing the essence of human behavior when it comes to tree knocks. And we can tease out that influence through analyzing that data, turning that data into numbers and analyzing it statistically. So that's where the science comes in. The science comes in with statistical analysis. We're speaking the language of the scientists, numbers, math. That's what science, that's the foundation of most scientific disciplines. It's not pictures, it's not casts. And we've learned from the Patterson-Gimlin film that science doesn't like those things already.
Sorry to interject.
That's okay.
So if you can do a more controlled, say like you go to an area and you try 75 times at 10 o'clock at night to do a knock, and let's say 13 times you get a reply, and then at 2 a.m. you've also got it written down that you do knocks, 75 knocks, and you get 29 replies. So now you've got mathematical things that you can see, given time frames of when they're active, how many times you've tried, and things like that. So you can change it over into a mathematical equation.
Exactly. And what this experiment you're considering, where you do 75 knocks, record it, and then sometime later, hours later, you do another 75. What that's studying is the influence of timing, the influence of time of day on knocks from Bigfoot. Now, if you want to rule out, because I gave the example of the humans, because that's always one of the big questions. How can you rule out humans doing those knocks? We can't, not too many people, if any. I think one person claims to have seen a Bigfoot do a tree knock, hitting a stick against a tree. But there's always that question, since you haven't seen that, whether that's a human making that tree knock or a Bigfoot. And so by having your control condition, your human condition, you can compare your human condition to your Bigfoot condition and see which is producing more or less knocks, much in the same way as what you're proposing is, do we get more knocks at a specific time,
I'm sorry. I did. Maybe I should just start raising my hand, and you give me an opening to ask a question. Rather than it sounds so rude of me to just interrupt.
No, that's okay.
But when I was listening to your podcast last night with a very country gentleman, he was a very country guy, and you guys were talking about knocks and things, and he was suggesting that they use their mouth or pop their chest or something like to that effect. I'm going to tell you, I've got a couple of experiences myself from way back when I first started that I was 100% for myself, and I think I'm pretty logical that they indeed use a physical stick rather than popping their mouth or hitting their chest or slapping their hands. And that is the night of my main encounter. I heard it dragging a stick, and it made a distinct sound every time he was walking through gravel. I heard the stick dragging through gravel. And then when he was walking in the leaves, I never heard the stick again, because you don't hear it dragging through leaves, but you do hear his footsteps through the leaves. But every time he crossed a gravel pathway, I would hear that stick dragging through the gravel. And he was hitting lantern post every time he came to a lantern post. So I knew he had a physical stick in his possession that he was taking around through the park with him, until I had my sighting where I saw that it was indeed these creatures. And at that time, it hit a tree for the first time. So all of these components that involve a stick being used convinced me at the time, at least in this instance, it had a physical stick in its possession. And then later, in I think 2019, I was up in the Blue Mountains, the same mountains that Paul Freeman had reported all of his encounters. And I was up there with a naturalist from Georgia, and he was doing a month-long project. And it was our second summer together up there. And I was recording all kinds of knocks going on this ridge above us. And I was trying to explain to him why their Bigfoot's doing that. And he was trying to tell me there's got to be a natural explanation. There's got to be something natural as to why that's happening. I said, why is it only up on the ridges then? Why isn't it happening in the woods right over here, and over here? If it's something naturally happening within the woods themselves. And so he's like, okay, so that's a good point. That's a good point. And then on the second night, I hear another 20 or 30 knocks. We're listening to my recordings from the night before. You're hearing these knocks. And what I was doing is I was taking an empty tent way up there on the ridge and leaving an empty tent with a recorder in the floor of the tent. And that's how I was catching all of these knocks on that ridge. You hear one of the knocks and you hear the stick break and fall like a bat breaking in somebody's hands, and you hear it clamor and clank and fall against a log or a tree. And I had the naturalist come over. I said, man, you're not going to believe this. I said, come over here. And I said, listen to this. I was, what? And it sounded exactly like I'm telling you. You could hear the stick break and fall. And he says, well, that surely changes things. So
a little bit.
So he was very scientific in his thought. He needed to see more evidence, and he thought I was on the Bigfoot spectrum where everything was Bigfoot, and I was looking for ways to prove that it was Bigfoot. But we kind of had a mutual where we came to an understanding, and those are two instances where I believe we were dealing with physical sticks.
Sure.
So I don't need many more than two instances. I don't need to jump to the chest and the mouth, especially when I know how fast they can break a branch off of a tree. I've had that experience happen with the bluff charge where you could hear it popping one off the trunk in a matter of seconds. So it can pop one off and turn it into a club in just a couple of seconds.
Sure. And with I don't, with all due respect to you, two instances enough for you. And I think this is one of the issues with observational science. You only need to see Bigfoot once to know that it's real. Okay. But that's not enough. Two instances or one instant isn't enough from a scientific perspective. And as I was listening to the example that you gave, again, another way to use this same design, you can see which locations you get more knocks in. If you get more knocks high up, or you get more knocks low, and narrow your focus of attention and where you do your tree knocks as opposed to your stone clacks, as opposed to your whoops. But so getting back to your original question of how do you get people to record that stuff? I mean, every Bigfoot expedition in BFRO that I've been on, we record the time we go out, the times of our provocations, what the provocation was. Did we get a response? How long after the provocation? We record all that data. So I don't think the challenge is so much, at least within BFRO circles, getting people to record that data. It's getting people to hold on to that data and convert it into a numeric database so that you can study it. As I understand it, the flats, which is the database for BFRO, as I understand it, that database is more in narrative form rather than in numeric form. So to do some statistical analysis on that, you'd have to convert a lot of that into numeric form. So the challenge, I think, to make what we're doing more scientific is, number one, learn how to do the statistics, learn how to do the experimental design, hold on to those variables, and then study it over the long run. I think with observational science being the gold standard, once you've seen one, I mean, that's kind of the holy grail. I haven't met too many people who have seen them and want it to stop. Most people, when they see them, they want to see one that I've met, at least. When they see one, they want to see at least one more just to validate what they saw the first time. But to your point, it's a challenge to get people to want to do more strenuous work to make it more scientific. When you can get the recognition you can, and the trophies you can, I think, through observational science. But if we don't do that, then our only hope is a corpse.
Right. Well, going back to talking about tree knocks, and there's a bit of an irony here in I don't believe most people that I'm talking to. Unfortunately, that's the state of affairs that we're in. Because I've been out with enough people, and I see the tomfoolery in what people take in and what their observations, and they're very limited and biased. So unfortunately, it's ironic that I expect you to believe me because I feel like I'm a logical person, but I hardly believe anybody else. So isn't that weird? But I will tell you, there was a location in southern Missouri that I've been involved with for at least 6 years, where there's a family unit on there, and we've gotten as close as 8 foot away from one of the juveniles. I've caught them on thermal video. It was trying to hide in deep grass, walked up on it using the thermal to locate it and walk up to it, and it stayed hidden. So these are the kind of incidents we're dealing with there, and so they are there, and as far as the knocks, I've found evidence myself that they're also using rocks to hit trees. We had a knock at the corner of the field that was so loud. I had the generator running, and I look at Shane and I was like, "Did you hear that?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I had recorded it. And it was right over in the field that we were camping in, but lots of trees and lots of scrub, lots of. So down at the creek, it was came from. So the next day, we're down over there looking around, and we find some 6-inch tracks along with some 9-inch tracks. So we knew there were some siblings that we're dealing with. And we worm our way back following these tracks back into the cubby hole, and there's a log laying on the ground, and sitting right on top of that log, which is where we heard that knock the night before, was a baseball sized rock sitting on top of that log in the thick scrub. And we're just like, that's where that knock came from last night, and the rock is still sitting there on top of that log. And that's when my partner told me, because he had been coming to this location a lot longer than me. We also had discussions where when you get a response knock, the question is, how can they respond so quickly, or how can they locate a rock or a hitting stick so quickly? And that's why people come up with the idea of hitting their chest and stuff, because they can't understand how quickly they can do this. Well, my partner has found at least 3 different locations where in the fork of a tree, about 3 or 4 foot off the ground, is a nice hefty rock up in the fork of the tree, like phone booths located in certain locations on this property. So let's just say the large male sends out one of the siblings, go up on that ridge over there and let me know when it's clear. So when he's up there, if they have specific trees where they've got a rock sitting in the fork of the tree, all dad has to hear is that knock coming off that ridge over there, and he knows exactly where the youngster is because they've already got these pre-set up phone booths. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. I don't know if the name Janice Carter means anything to you.
I've got the book.
Okay. You do?
Yep.
How did you manage that?
Back in the very beginning, I got her
Wow.
book from Mary Green. I used to converse with Mary Green, and Mary Green's the reason we caught the Ridgewalker video in 2005, because Mary Green said put the camera facing away from where you're directing all your energies, and it'll come in behind you. And we caught one.
Wow. So when we were on this subject of she's not a best friend, but she's a good Bigfoot friend, and I'd still call her a personal friend. And we were kicking this around, and the idea of phone booths is what focused me on this. She said that that they use hollow trees, that they know where trees that are hollow are, and will either use a lip smack into one of the openings, so that it then becomes like a big flute or a big piccolo, the hollow tree, or will again knock on a hollow tree with a stick, which then magnifies and amplifies that sound. So that's her thinking on that. And again, I think, what we're discussing are all these different hypotheses about tree knocks. And if we can figure out experiments to quantify these by numbers, then we don't have to rely on our opinions. We don't have to rely on what we think or our hypotheses, not having seen them make the tree knock. Or did I understand you to say you saw one make a tree knock? No. Okay. So because the numbers give us the answers rather than the opinion, or the pissing contests, or who's got the most strongest or most dynamic personality. Once we start doing experiments and analyses, statistical analyses, those analytic numbers give us the answers, and there won't be any more, my way, this is what I thought, or this is, I've been doing this for 10 years and I know what I'm talking about, kind of thing.
Well, I was having a conversation. Todd Gatewood. He's been working with the Patty film pretty exclusively for the last year or so. Cleaning it up and using new technology to clean it up. Well, anyways, so he and I are friends, and we were just having a discussion. Talking about things, and you're not going to believe this, but I just lost my train of thought. I'm going to have to eat me some peanut butter.
Well, let me jump in real quick then.
All right.
While you're eating. So what John is proposing is all of this research, quote unquote, that's being done is basically stagnant. It's going nowhere. Everybody's doing the same thing, pretty much. We got to start thinking outside the box, start coming up with different ideas, different concepts. As John was stating, his book is absolutely astronomically wonderful if you can follow it and understand the terminology. It will put your brain in a different place once you're out there. The same old keeps going on. The same patterns of people researching. One thing that I do personally that I haven't seen anybody else do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I take extremely long notes written while I'm out. When I get home, everything is written down as far as the moon phase, the illumination percentage, the dew point, the humidity, the wind direction, elevation, and crunch it into numbers down the road. Eventually, a pattern might appear that at this certain time of day or night, the certain time of moon phase or illumination, it all comes down to collecting data in a different form than the generic going out looking for footprints or recording. I'm just stating that it's stagnant, and everybody in the world now is a researcher. There's so many out there. If it truly worked, if we put enough boots on the ground, will that help? I mean, if we covered
that's why people need to get this book, because it's about getting your mind right.
Exactly.
Before you're influenced by every peddler out there, attention peddler that's out there. And I've got to tell you, now I can go back to what I was before I lost my train of thought, talking about what I was talking with Todd Gatewood about. And I said, all of the articles that you could find in the newspaper before Patty was filmed, you can believe, because those people would report it as it happened, as they saw it. Wild man was getting in my garden. Wild man was on the edge of the woods, chased my horse. Wild man this, wild man that, and knocks were heard, and the beast was seen on all fours, covered in hair. You can believe them from that point, because it was all just factual reporting to the newspaper. After the Patty was filmed, and the internet became easily accessed, all of a sudden we're filled with fraudsters, attention seekers, whatever, just people filling their cup with nonsense because it makes them feel good. And that is a sorry lot to be pulling your information from.
That's correct. So to piggyback to your point, the Bossberg tracks in my area from 1959, the famous Bossberg track line. This is just a stone's throw away from my house. Now, I've gone back and I've found descendants of the people who lived on this property along the Columbia River 10 years prior, who going to school had seen this juvenile at this time walking through the orchards. Those people had become so used to this, what quote unquote cripple foot, from 1949 to 1959, a 10-year gap. And all these people's stories were consistent. That all of a sudden, like you said, the internet blew up and everybody's,
and it's look at me. I mean, and showing no research, nothing. I can't spend much time on these. I look at the pictures and I'm just like, next. They're showing nothing that you can learn anything from.
I'd like to state also one other thing. I've been doing this for 13 years, and I've noticed a trend also in an uptick of military personnel, ex-military, veterans jumping on the bandwagon also. That's where I kind of get a little miffed, put in the time first. Don't add that little, logo or slogan to add credibility. Your street cred don't mean nothing. It's believability. Like you just said, look at me. Look at who I am today.
You hit the nail on the head. When it comes down to opinion, as it does with observational science, credibility is everything. And so, that's why that's so important. And yet that would become less important if we had numbers to make those calls for us, rather than a person's opinion to make those calls.
So if you were to give instructions to people, the easiest thing to do, and I've always thought this is the easiest thing to do, find someone smarter than you to hang out with. That's the single most best thing you can do, is quit hanging out with dummies. Find someone smarter than you to hang out with, because unfortunately the smarter person is going to get dumber hanging out with me, but I'm going to get smarter.
That's a good one. That's so true.
Yeah.
And because most people, they're not looking to do it better. I just don't see it out there, and that's the hard. So that's why I've been a loner. I want to go out and hang out with Jason because I like what he's doing. I like what I hear when I talk to him, and that's the biggest catalyst. You have to talk to somebody, and then you have to use your own judgment. Is this person going to work for me? Because I don't want to go somewhere where I'm going to waste my time.
Thank
Right.
you. Same.
Yeah.
Feel the same.
Yeah.
So what about you, John? You've been around a lot of people. What percentage of people do you think have in this arena is bringing the juice? 5%, 3%, less?
Meaning having actual experiences
Well,
and
just in the direction that they're going, and they're just what you get from these people are they bringing the juice that or are they just a crowd of followers that's just I want an experience and that's all I'm here for, and the continuation of nothingness.
I
boy,
would say,
I'm
oh, sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
Jason.
from what my personal opinion, less than 1%
I would agree.
are truly adding or doing it the correct way.
I haven't honestly thought of a number. A couple weeks ago, I posted on my I don't have a web page for my Bigfoot stuff. It's all my personal page. And I posted a question on my web page of, given that we've learned from the Patterson Gimlin film that photos and videotape and pictures of prints and foot casts of prints. I mean, the take home lesson from that for me, and I think it should be for other people, is that's not going to be satisfactory evidence to prove Bigfoot as a species. But yet we keep doing it. That's what the majority of people keep doing. And so, some of that has got to be because we don't know any other way. That's what we've learned. That's what's being used as the gold standard. I think some of that is it's a lot easier than doing the harder work of running an experiment, and you get all the benefits with that. Jason, you mentioned the pats on the back, the whole field of celebrity recognition. One of the terms I coined in my book is pimping Bigfoot, and basically exploiting the name of Bigfoot for profit. But I grew up in a research arena where there was no commercial product or sales. You wrote grants to do your research. That's how you got your money. You got funding through the merit of your work rather than can you sell enough barbecue sauce to fund your next expedition or fund your next talk at a conference. And so for me, when I mention pimping Bigfoot, it's virtually any kind of commercial process associated with Bigfoot, including what we're doing here, a podcast.
That's
so
true.
I think it depends. From there you go to how's that money used and where does it go, and how exploitive is it. I'm not. I've kind of lost my point as well. You asked me about bringing the juice. Oh, so I asked how many people on my website. I asked, why do we keep doing something we know isn't going to help prove the existence of Bigfoot? And one of the most common answers I got was, I don't care about proving Bigfoot's existence. I do it for myself. Why do we need to prove Bigfoot's existence? Why is that even important? And so I think there are a lot of people out there that are doing it for themselves for a variety of reasons, even just personal curiosity or a personal experience. You know, that's how I got into doing it. I wanted to see a Bigfoot. And I think that's true for a lot of people, and why a lot of people do this is to have that experience. And it's kind of a hard pill for me to swallow that people aren't interested in doing something to benefit the species.
Correct.
Um, ever since I wrote my book, because the first book that you mentioned, Randy, it had as an alternative no kill research, an alternative to no kill research. And so, I think part of the good news is there are techniques and methods that can be scientific and can bring scientific data to the table without killing the Bigfoot. Whether that's ultimately going to be accepted by science, I think only time will tell. And starting to do this kind of research will tell. So far, I haven't inspired too many people, and I've got cancer that limits my mobility, so it's kind of tough for me to do. And that's one of the other challenges of doing science. If you want to do this, for example, the tree knock study and ruling out or in a human influence, you need a minimum team of 4 people working at the same time. And it's tough sometimes. The one of the downsides of the internet is upsides is we can connect it from distances. The downside is it's physically tough to connect from distances to coordinate a research effort.
Well,
Because
I'll tell you, 2 years ago when I purchased this thermal drone that I have, uh, my idea, and I think to me it would be less work for me to capture something with the thermal drone where I can follow it. And let's just say I've got a Bigfoot on the run, that I finally have the drone in the sky, the rocks were being thrown into my camp. I got the drone in the air, and there he is, and there he goes. And I'm going to follow him for a while. And he does something so physically extraordinary, like jumps up a vertical 12-foot cliff, or runs and jumps across
Mhm.
a 35-foot creek, that I now have on a thermal drone that we can now measure and say, here's the video, here's the spot where it jumped from, and you can see where it landed, and here's, we've got its measurements, we got its feet,
Mhm.
and it's a 45-foot jump that it just made, and we've got this all I've always thought in my mind that if I can capture something like that, that you can physically see and measure, that cannot be duplicated by a human at all, would be a start for myself.
I got one also for you. Somebody will always say that they can do what you captured, or they will pick it apart and spin it for them to win over your proof, to debunk it.
But with the thermal drone, especially if you can follow one for a
Correct.
considerable distance doing distance, then you're going to have layers where it I can see 3 trees that it brushed against as it went
Mm-hmm.
around the corner, and now we're going to
Mm-hmm.
go pluck some hairs off that tree. So we're going to have some hairs, we've got foot
Mm-hmm.
tracks, and we've got distances jumped, and we've got elevations climbed and jumped. And
Mm-hmm.
if we can get multiple layers of certain things in one video that has layers, maybe.
but
Correct.
but didn't but didn't isn't that what the Patterson Gimlin film is? We've got video, we got stills, we got the raw footprints, we've got the casts analyzed and validated. We've got to me, with all respect to your buddy who's further dissecting the Patterson Gimlin film, it's been analyzed to death, in my opinion. And so in that film, we've got multiple data points and multiple criteria, and yet it still wasn't good enough. And so, you know, when before I jumped on here, you guys were talking about hair traps. You know, if you're hoping, and I'm sure you know this, if you're hoping to get DNA, just getting the hair isn't enough. You've got to do a hair and a flesh trap, because it's only when you get blood samples or flesh samples that you can synthesize a complete genome to know
Correct.
both the mother and the father's heritage. So everybody's scrambling now, and good for Daniel, the young man over in England who found eDNA of ancient ape in a forest in England. That's awesome, and that's created quite a stir, because there's no history whereby ancient ape should be in those forests. But here in the United States, finding eDNA of ancient ape is no big deal. Yet
No?
everybody's scrambling for, because it's an easy way to collect DNA evidence and say you got DNA evidence consistent with Bigfoot. But my point being, you can't get the full genome from environmental DNA. So I'm not sure what my point was or why I brought that up, but
But yeah, I'm getting blood tissue, tissue samples,
oh,
with some blood and things like that. I mean, if just like Jason and I were speaking earlier, I'm heavy on behavioral patterns for the last 20 some odd years, that I've had so many things happen, and I can start to pinpoint patterns of behavior
Hmm.
that I think are significant. And once you can establish a pattern of behavior in a certain location, and then deploy these little snag traps that can take some skin tissue or blood tissue or hairs, or simultaneously all three, would be fantastic. So once you can establish a pattern of travel, a travel corridor or a travel pattern, and then get out of the way, let it continue its travel pattern so you're not disrupting that, it could be significant.
yes.
I'd like to give a, a point about any type of other evidence other than tissue. As John was saying, that's the holy grail next to a corpse. I mean, that once that you or somebody can obtain that particular specimen, who's going to be able to dispute that once it's broken down, as John says, into the whole tree, DNA tree branch? But any type of evidence that's found, and I'm going to give an example, isn't good enough. So what I mean by that is, I found, and I believe I mentioned this when we first spoke, femurs from a mountain sheep that were spiral twisted and broken, a spiral break. And they were stacked up like cores of wood. And again, one of them was opened with a stick to obtain bone marrow. I mentioned this to a particular person, and they are recreating this quote unquote experiment to see just how much torque and pressure it would take to grasp above and below and spiral break a femur of an animal. That's a human, we're not strong enough to do that. But even proving that it's beyond human capacity to fracture in a spiral manner a massive femur bone, that's not good. That's not good enough proof. We need, like you said, John said, use tissue, undisputable tissue samples. And your idea is a pretty good one. I really like it without giving
Well,
away any secrets.
yeah, even let's say so a couple key points that I think is important. Replication for validation is important. And so if we get a carcass, maybe somebody shoots one or they get hit crossing the road and they die. If we get a carcass, that's going to be a huge step. But we're still not, and probably people will then say, yes, Bigfoot's been proven. But there's no repetition or validation there. You're going to need to prove it's a species unto itself. You're going to need more, in my opinion. You're going to need at least two bodies to validate your findings from the first body to see if things are matching up in terms of the species itself. But even then, once we've done that, it's not a situation where you can just say, okay, so now that we got a body, we know that Bigfoots are doing the tree knocks, or Bigfoots are doing the howls, or Bigfoots are doing this, that, or the other, because an autopsy won't necessarily prove. It might prove the capacity to do some of those things, but it's a whole nother ball game to prove that it's them doing. And that's where I'm not bringing anything unique to the table. Experimental science has been going on for a long, long time, more than I've been on this earth. But that's where, so even after we get a body or two, we're still going to need experimental science to link these behaviors, link these phenomena to Bigfoot, because it's not going to be scientifically sufficient to say, okay, now we got a body, now we know it's them doing the tree knocks.
And with that in mind, I would like to say this for my viewing audience. I said some disparaging things about people in general that are in this subject. Yes, you're going to have to allow me my freedom of frustration for as long as I've been in this, and the people that I've dealt with and the people that I've been out with. You're going to have to allow me the freedom to show some of that frustration. I know there I'm going to get a lot of comments from people like, "Oh, you really poo-pooed on people, and shame on you," and now we're talking about getting a body. You're just going to have to allow us to have an intellectual discussion about certain things, and not get your feelings hurt. We're all adults here. You're going to have to let this take place. Things are going to happen. People are going to make decisions to do things their way, and they're going to do things. You're just going to have to allow some things to happen. You can't let your comments dictate how you think you're going to change my point of view by a snotty comment or something like that. You just let us have our discussion. Let us come to our own conclusions. We're all running this race at a different pace. Some of us are running, some of us are crawling. I'm barely a toddler in this race trying to learn things. So let us learn what we're trying to learn here.
Very well said.
Yeah. I think, at least, not that I need to defend myself, but again, these techniques are being offered up as an alternative to killing, offering a scientific path for proof of the species without having to take a body. So I don't know if I'm coming off as pro-kill, but I'm certainly not.
Yeah.
Your point.
I'm not pro kill myself. I'm just smart enough to know that there are people out there actively trying to secure a body, and I really don't care one way or the other. I'm not going to besmirch another man's character, and I'm not going to, if that's what he's decided he needs to do, if he listens to me, maybe he'll change his mind. I don't know. I'm not here to change his mind. It's just out there. One of these days we may have a body. It may be stuck in the radiator on the front end of a diesel truck as he pulls into a truck stop some night. Who knows? I don't know. That may be how a body is obtained. Nonetheless, a body will be laying on a table at some point, somehow. I believe so. So here we are.
But to prove or to back up John's point, one body does not prove what he was stating, that the tree knocks or two or more. But man, that was a great analogy, John.
Yeah,
Need
it helps
to.
it inches us closer. I mean,
Correct.
it inches us closer, but it's not set in stone for sure.
Mhm.
Sure. Even a clock's right twice a day.
Right.
Except for my
Yeah.
Broken clock, huh?
a broken clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how
It's
did you guys meet? I mean, how you two guys have a pretty good friendship. As a matter of fact, a little bird told me that you guys might be sharing a campfire here before too long up in the Pacific Northwest. How exciting! How excited are you for that,
I
John?
can't I can't tell you how excited I am for that. Um, yeah, we met. So yeah, number one, yeah, Jason's throwing a little camping shindig out at his place and was nice enough to invite me. And I'm scraping and scratching to get out there. I'm targeting buying my ticket here next week when I get when I get paid again. Um, but Jason and I met through Legend Meets Science. Legend Meets Science, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science 2. I was asked to be a psychological consultant for that movie by Doug Hychek. And it was decided that we do regressions of people back to their Bigfoot encounters and see if we can retrieve more memories. Because oftentimes when people have Bigfoot encounters, PTSD is a real thing, and people can develop PTSD. And even whether they develop PTSD or not, often associated with trauma is memory blanks, memory gaps. And so the plan was to use hypnosis to regress people back to their Bigfoot encounters and have them re-experience them and see if they can bring back any new memories. And so I was responsible for screening the possible hypnotic subjects. I was also going to be doing the hypnosis myself, but I couldn't get out to Washington, so somebody else ended up doing it. But Jason ended up being one of the people that I screened for that movie, and that's how Jason and I met.
Well, very good. And on that note, you said that he's invited you out there and graciously helping to get you out there. That's what Jason did to me. With once we had some conversations and we talked to each other and we've hit on certain levels and of just our logic. He too invited me out, just out of the blue. Come on out. I'll host you. I'll take you to these spots. Very gracious. I want everybody to know that I appreciate that. Just the fact that, of course, I'm going to be getting myself out there, and I'm working on that. In August, he really has stepped up. He's going to provide, because I'm involved in my own documentary, and we're trying to get this thing to come to some kind of ending, and it looks like we are going to end it up there with Jason, his
Nice.
findings. Meldrum involved also. It's going to give us a nice finish, a polished finish that we've been on for 2 or 3 years now on what I've been working with, and I am very thankful. I'm grateful that he's going to just be a part of this, in a way that we can finish this. I'm very excited. So yes.
Yeah, that's great. Good human being.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Yeah. Well,
I want to mention something about John. Him and I, although two different medical fields can kind of speak the same language. So when we're discussing privately, we're on a kind of a different level. And that's what I'm trying to bring out through what we're doing here. Trying to get people to think outside the box. As I said earlier, in my opinion, less than 1% of the label research or investigators are truly thinking outside the box and are not pimping or in it for the attaboy. I mean, that's what I'd really would like people to buy John's book. And I'm not pushing his book. I'm just stating it's a different way to think, to, as you said earlier, to get your mind right, instead of going out and everything is Sasquatch. Everything is Sasquatch. Every stick crossed, every sound you hear. If you can kind of wrap your head around a different vibe, you just might advance yourself for the better and for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, as long as we're talking about my book, I think one of the unique things about it is it's two books in one. And in the first half of the book, I teach people how to desensitize their fight flight response so that they won't respond with as strong of a fear or a fight flight response, and are more likely to be able to kind of hang in there and with a clearer head and mind observe and make their decisions.
Arm yourself with knowledge.
Yeah. And so reprogramming fight flight is one of the things that's in that book. And then the second half of the book is talking about experiments and experimental science. And in there, I outline an experiment about how we can figure out, well, an experiment that would begin to figure out whether we're, what zapping is, whether zapping is in fact infrasound causing our body to trigger those responses, or whether it's fear and us psyching ourselves into those experiences. I think there's some, and so that's a laboratory experiment that I lay out in the book, where you've got an infrasound condition and then a placebo infrasound condition, because since we can't hear infrasound, you can use a non-infrasound condition as a good placebo control to see if it triggers the same reactions in people the actual infrasound does. So I think that's pretty cool.
And that's
and
reasonable.
Yeah.
That is wholly reasonable explanation to a lot of things, because
Yeah.
a lot of people, we only have our own point of view, you know, to deal from. And I promise you, I have been close to these things. I promise you. And you can't even really believe that. And you shouldn't believe that, because it's just my story.
Sure.
But I'm telling you, I've been close to these things. I have never experienced any thoughts put into my own head. I have never experienced anything supernatural, anything paranormal, anything out of the normal range. But I can tell you, my first night in my truck, when the two came up close, I have experienced a fear that has not reached that level since that time. And being a trained firefighter, I can tell you, fear will do something to your perceptions of how you're taking information in, and it will extrapolate itself into some crazy fear. Will do that to you, a physical fear.
Yes.
Let me jump on that. Here's an experiment that I would like to elucidate with, as far as the point you just made. You take two soldiers who were in a firefight, and you do an after action report. Each individual will write down what they remember and what occurred. They're never going to be the same. And as you said, the fear that you experienced that night in your vehicle hasn't been reproduced yet as a
Right.
firefighter in that moment where you have to control yourself. So that's what John was saying as far as the placebo effect and his experiment. It's another way of thinking outside the box. And
I can tell you, if I wasn't in the safety of the cab of my truck that night, I would have totally lost my mind because I was losing my mind already, and I had the safety of being within the cab structure of that truck and still taking in everything that was happening. If I was outside of that truck in that close proximity to one of these things, my story would be totally different.
Interesting. I'm having a dementia moment here. I don't know. I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Don't be sorry. It'll come back to you. Hey, I lost my mind earlier and it came back to me. So but yeah, I mean the fear is a big thing. And the thing is about and I'm gonna bring up the analogy because that's my experiences as a firefighter. When I was a rookie firefighter in the bunk room for the first evening on duty in the bunk room where we've got all of our beds, I could not sleep at all. The thought of the bells dropping and me not being ready and me being the last one to get my bunker gear on at the truck when there's an emergency going on, I would lose my mind for the first couple of nights. I just couldn't get any sleep, and my captain had to pull me off his side. He says, "Look, you need to just calm down. One of these days, it will have happened so many times to you that it won't be such a big deal.
mm,
But until it does, it's going to be just out of your mind, big deal." That's the luxury of how many times I've been in close proximity to these things. Over time, you've learned to calm yourself down. It's happened enough now, and it never manifested itself into something where you're getting your arms ripped off and you beat to death. So you have learned to calm yourself down, and that helps situations. That seems to help manifest more situations because I think these beings read whether you are a calm person.
mhm.
So to get to being a calm person, you have to go through the beginnings of not being a calm person, which is kind of a weird irony of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you guys are hitting on the issue of staying calm. I guess so. When we reach down into a fire and pick up a stick out of the fire, the millisecond that our hand touches that hot stick, it sends electrical chemicals up our arm, into our neck, into our spinal cord. And that electrochemical signal is called sensation. The millisecond that that signal hits our brain and is processed by our brain, that's called perception. Sensation is purely physical, but our perception and how we see, hear, feel, taste, and smell things is influenced by our upbringing and our environment, how we've interacted with our environment. And so this is, again, one of the other problems with observational research, because we're relying on our personal observations, our personal perceptions, and no matter how hard we want to be objective, we are at a high risk of being biased because how we perceive things is influenced by how we're brought up and what we experience. We had a little bit of a sadistic scoutmaster when I was a kid, and I don't know if all scout troops went through this, but after being sent out on a snipe hunt, if no one, all the people that came back without any snipes, we had to eat a worm. And so what they did was they had a bag with earthworms in it, and they'd show us the earthworm bag, and then they'd blindfold us, and they'd let the earthworm kind of dangle and around our cheek. But then in another bag, that when they reached in, so you could hear them reaching in, I'm going to get a big lunken earthworm, a night crawler. And you had to open up, and they dropped the worm in your mouth. But in fact, it was a hot dog. They sliced the hot dogs to be like, dangly and squiggly like an earthworm. And so your mind, is prepped, can be prepped and convinced that you're eating an earthworm by the sensations that you get before you actually taste it. Another example is holding somebody's back to a fire and getting like a branding iron and getting that cherry red branding iron close to their back so they can really feel that heat, and doing that a couple times. And then the third time you do it, douse them with ice water. And their body will welt up just as if they've been burned. That sensation of burning, or that sensation of heat, or I'm sorry, the sensation of cold, it's been primed in our mind to be heat. And because of that priming, our body reacts to that placebo, if you will, as if it's heat. And so I guess I'm making several points. One of them is that placebo is real. Your body has real responses to placebo. It's not, when you have a placebo response to taking something in a study, like a cancer study, if you have a placebo, you get a placebo control and your tumor goes away, that tumor is gone. Okay. It's gone. It can be gone in response to a placebo response. So that's the difference between perception and sensation. And the other word that I wrote down when you guys were talking was desensitization. The more you're around something, the more desensitized you become to it, the more you get used to it, the less reactive you become, the clearer you think when you do react to those things. And that's also part of what's going on when you use the techniques of reprogramming your fight flight response that I talk about in the book.
Okay, well, I want to bring that up to people. I've been around a lot of people, and I've asked them point blank, when's the last time you read a book? And unbelievably, a lot of people be like, wow, I haven't read a book since high school, or I haven't, there are a lot of people out there who are not taking advantage of the information that is found in books, and you can highly educate yourself on your own by becoming a reader. So all of you out there who are not readers or not much of a reader, start with this book, get this book, and start becoming a reader, because you will thank yourself in the future because of the knowledge that you will gain that are between the hard covers of a book. So I'm telling you.
Yeah, read. Thank you. That's a good idea. Speaking of thinking out of the box, the other theory about being zapped, some people believe it's infrasound. but other people believe it's electromagnetic fields. And now, you guys are no doubt familiar with the Faraday clothing they've got for hunters now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if zapping is an electromagnetic thing, we could be using that clothing. I'm sure it's very expensive, but we could be using that clothing to run some experiments out in the field by either shielding everybody except one person and seeing if that one person gets zapped when the others don't, or somehow manipulating, you know, the electromagnetic the electromagnetic output and input through that clothing. And I think that would be an interesting experiment to kick around.
Well, I'm way over here on the spectrum. I don't think anyone's ever been zapped. I think it's all made up caca. And that's just my opinion
Mhm.
because I've never experienced it as close as I've been, and I should have experienced it, and I've never have. So until it happens to me, I'm going to be the one that I don't believe anybody has been zapped. I think a lot of people get caught up in the storytelling, and it's the latest thing to talk about, and I'm going to be somebody. So I'm going to say that I was zapped because
Mm-hmm.
now I'm one of the attention pimps.
Yeah. There is a great sense of belonging and status within our community
Yes.
that comes with certain of these experiences, without a doubt.
Jason, you take me out there and you get me zapped, mister, so that I can say I was zapped.
I don't believe in it. So good luck. We'll touch a barbed wire fence, electrified. That's the best I can
See,
do. Or
that's why me and Jason get along, because when something's going to happen to us, you can take it to the bank. We're going to write it down, and this is what happened.
Mhm.
And until then, to me, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Well, interestingly enough, I have noticed that people who get zapped typically get zapped more than once. And I know some people that get zapped at a particular habituation area almost every time they're out there.
They say they get zapped. We
They,
don't know if
they
they get
say
zapped
they
or
get
not.
zapped. Well, and the people in their little expedition subgroup witness the physical effects of the zapping. Okay. And it would be, again, an experiment targeting these people that repeatedly get zapped and put on this Faraday clothing with them. And if zapping is magnetic electrical field, see if they don't get zapped that particular time out. Again,
I,
that's
what
only
I
a sample of one, but
what I don't understand is how in a group of people, one person can get zapped and all 10 of them don't get zapped. But that's because they're going to say, well, they can direct the energy to whoever they're trying to direct it to. That sounds like a big excuse to me. Everybody should be zapped if there's any zapping going on.
yeah, more generalized effect. One of the other things that I discovered when I was doing my show on zapping for my podcast and YouTube show, turns out that truckers, long over the road truckers, that their rigs, the big rigs, produce infrasound through the combination of their motors and the road. So, you know, we would expect to see some of the same side effects, if you will. We should be seeing them in truckers. I'm sure you're familiar, or maybe you're not, Randy, with elephants.
Mhm.
Elephants communicate 10 miles apart using infrasound. In the zoos, you can't be an elephant keeper for more than 3 months at a time. They've got to rotate them out because just working with the elephants on a daily basis, people start getting health problems from dealing with the infrasound, headaches, nausea, vomiting. And so they've got the elephant trainers and the elephant cage cleaners, they got to cycle out on 3-month cycles to kind of rid themselves of the zappings, or not zapping, but the infrasound side effects.
So it's basically such a low frequency, kind of like the military, uses, for to
Yes.
disperse mobs. Hit them with a sound that's very uncomfortable. So it's really no different than that. It's just a low frequency that you can just kind of feel. Yeah, I mean, certainly that is a thing for sure.
Well, the elephants are creating this sound naturally. The military or our enemies who are zapping our embassies with this unknown infrasound that was causing employees to become ill and physically sick. That's mechanical, electrical. I'm just not on the side as you are with the zapping of one individual out of 10. I just can't see how they could focus on one person. I think yes, I just think it's
hysteria.
Exactly. But that's, again, like Randy, that's my personal opinion. And if anybody is butthurt, I'm sorry. It's just how I feel.
There'll be no butt hurts in my audience. Okay. Nobody gets butt hurt in my audience because they're all adults.
There you go.
And you let us have our opinions up here on the panel.
and that's part of the reason why I've limited my focus and suggestions to studying Bigfoot phenomena and experimenting with Bigfoot phenomena rather than Bigfoot researchers. I didn't want to get known as the guy who analyzes Bigfoot researchers. That seemed like a pretty slippery slope to me.
Well, if I could find, you just can't find, to me, you can't find absolutely, completely sensible people that's doing this, because it's too easy to get not only caught up in the crowd, but you'll catch yourself. Okay, I'll believe you because I'll feel better believing you, and I want to be part of the crowd. You will alienate yourself being 100% logical because people don't want to deal with just straight logic.
Exactly.
That's why I feel like if I could get a group of people together, say like me and Jason, and go out, I think we would come back with some real data, because we're not going to let ourselves be influenced by crowd think.
It's correct. I'd like to add something about the question, Randy, earlier about how John and I met. John did a very good job prepping me for this regression state that I was put under. And unfortunately, as John mentioned, he couldn't make it. But I do believe if anybody out there has had an encounter that they want to prove to themselves that it really did occur, seek out somebody like John who can perform this regression. I can't explain what I recalled during my session, but I do know that I recalled a lot of data that was stored on my hard drive deep back inside that was pulled out. Yes. So if anybody out there has, again, had an encounter that they want to verify in a very specific setting, seek out somebody who can do it, because I wasn't a believer at first, and I sure am now.
Well, hell, I'd like to go through it.
Well, I call it the best way to prove beyond a lie detector test. It wasn't my idea. I was just a participant in it, but the benefits that I received were beyond my expectations. And John's the one who set me up for it.
Yeah.
He took, I can't take him enough for how he prepped me for it, even though, he wasn't there.
Well, you're too kind. Thanks. Less people hear that as a plug for me doing trauma regression. That's something, I mean, I have since done some, but that's not something I do over a video screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I would only do in person. And I just want to put that out there. I don't want people to be misled or call thinking that I'm going to agree to, do a regression with them over the phone or over a video screen. It has to happen in person.
It's not safe. No, you got to be with the person.
Wow.
So please seek out. Yeah. Don't do it over Skype. As John said, it's got to be done in person.
Well, I think we've been in here for we're 20 minutes till 9 on my time, so we must have been in here for a while. But hey, I wanted to throw out when we get together in August, even though I'm trying to get Cynthia and them to fly in here to KCI, and then we all drive up there together. When they're ready to leave, I can just take them to an airport there, and if they're renting the vehicle that I'm going to be in, because I'm going to use them to help get me there, if if I can just take them to an airport, and then I can just stay as long as I want after that and by myself and be on their dime on that rented vehicle, and then drive myself home when I'm good and ready to go home.
Let's go. Let's go. It'd be prime time of the year.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I need to take advantage of it. If I'm there, I need to stay there till I'm sick of it.
There you go. Well, you might just end up moving here.
Oh.
All right, guys. Well,
John, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into this subject matter. I can't wait to get the book, and I hope some other people get it too. And I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for letting me come on and spiel and talk about my propaganda. And I've enjoyed the conversation, and be happy to do it again.
All right. Well, you guys enjoy your trip, and if anything happens up there that's extremely exciting and lively, maybe we will have another meeting talking about it.
Sounds good.
All right, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
all right. See y'all later. Bye, John.
Bye-bye.